When my son invited me to live with him and his wife after my husband passed, I thought it was a blessing, a second chance to be close, to be family again. At first, it felt like home, but on Christmas Eve, as gifts were passed out one by one, with warm hugs, laughter, and even a toaster for the mailman, I stood there empty-handed. My own son didn't even look at me. I smiled, just like I smiled when I called the lawyer the next morning, and handed myself the title deed they thought I'd forgotten about. I never imagined I'd spend the last stretch of my life in my son's guest room. It wasn't planned that way. After my husband passed, the silence of our old home became unbearable. The hallway echoes, the creak of the floorboards without his laugh, it all became too heavy. So when Daniel suggested I move in, it felt like a lifeline. "It'll be good for everyone," he said. "Lena and I could use the help, and Emily would love having her grandma around." I told myself this was family, coming together, holding on, supporting one another. Everyone around us seemed to envy my position. "You're so lucky," my neighbor Donna told me. "Living with family in your old age, that's the dream." And at first, I agreed. Mornings began with Emily tiptoeing into my room asking for pancakes. I'd tie her hair while humming old songs, the same ones I once sang to Daniel. The kitchen buzzed with activity. Me flipping eggs, Emily coloring at the table, Daniel rushing through coffee. I found joy in the small things, folding laundry before they got home, keeping Lena's plants alive, making sure the house always smelled like cinnamon and comfort. But it didn't take long for the rhythm to feel one-sided. No one asked me to cook, clean, or babysit, but they stopped doing it themselves the moment I moved in. I became the default. Dinner was assumed. Dishes were mine. Grocery lists appeared on the fridge without conversation. I didn't mind, not at first. "This is how I stay useful," I told myself. "This is how I love them." There were no thank yous, no glances of appreciation. On Emily's birthday, I stayed up till 2 a.m., baking her favorite strawberry cake, decorating it with tiny edible butterflies. When she saw it, her face lit up. But it was Lena who got the credit. Daniel snapped a photo and captioned it, "Lena's beautiful work as always." I smiled. I always smiled. Still, I convinced myself, I'm needed here. This is home. But things shifted in quiet, calculated ways. Lena began reorganizing the kitchen. She labeled shelves and designated zones. One night, I reached for a cup of tea at 9:30 p.m., and the cabinet was locked. She laughed the next morning. "Oh, I've started locking up after 9. It helps with the mess. You don't mind, right?" Another day, I walked into the living room just as she was wrapping up a call. She flinched when she saw me. "It's just my mom," she said too quickly. But her voice had been sharp, distant, nothing like how she spoke to me. I noticed other things too. Emily began to hesitate before hugging me when her mother was around. Daniel stopped looking me in the eye during dinner. My chair at the table, once next to Emily, was pushed to the far end. I told myself it was logistics, space, noise. But then Lena said something I couldn't unhear. "Mom, you need your rest," she said sweetly one night as I reached for a dishcloth. "You don't have to stay up with us." Her smile was pleasant, her voice soft, but her eyes, they were clear, distant, directive. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a boundary, one I hadn't drawn. Daniel said nothing, just kept scrolling through his phone like it wasn't strange that his mother was being dismissed from the room like a toddler past bedtime. That night, I began writing again. It started with a sentence on the back of an old receipt. "I don't think they see me anymore." The next day, I found a blank journal, tucked it into the drawer beside my bed, and began to write every evening. Not poetry, not anger, just truth, observations, a log of becoming invisible in the very house I thought I belonged to. I watched the family portraits on the wall, smiling faces framed in gold. Not one photo included me. Not one. Emily still loved me. She'd sneak into my room with whispered giggles and secret drawings. But I noticed Lena pulling her away more often now. "Don't bother Grandma," she'd say. "Let her rest." Rest from what? From existing? I felt the air grow colder, not from winter, but from detachment. I was still cooking, still folding, still giving. But something inside me had begun to harden, not out of resentment, but preservation. Because sometimes, when people erase you quietly, the only power you have left is to remember yourself. Christmas morning used to mean coffee and carols, pancakes shaped like reindeer, and Daniel's off-key voice belting Mariah Carey in his pajamas. But this year, it felt rehearsed, cold. Everything was coordinated. Lena had color-coded the gift wrap, the matching pajamas, the Instagram captions. Still, I gave it my all. I'd woken up at 4 a.m. to roast the turkey, glaze the ham, and bake 3 pies. Pecan, apple, and sweet potato, Emily's favorite. I lit cinnamon candles around the house and hung the stockings myself because no one else thought to. By the time guests arrived, everything shimmered with warmth. The house looked like a Hallmark postcard, and I, dressed in my best green sweater and pearls, stood back and watched with a quiet sort of pride. This is what mothers do, I told myself. This is how we love. Lena welcomed her parents first, beaming as she poured them wine. Her brother came next with his girlfriend. Daniel played the host, shaking hands and laughing loud, his arms slung around Lena like they were in a holiday commercial. Emily bounced from lap to lap, her curls tied with red ribbons. No one introduced me. I floated in and out of rooms, refilling appetizers, folding napkins, straightening crooked table runners. I caught glimpses of myself in mirrors, like a maid at her own family's gathering. Then came the gifts. Everyone gathered in the living room, cocoa in hand, eyes twinkling. Daniel clapped. "Okay, let's do presents." Lena passed them out one by one, narrating each handoff like a show. "Emily, from Grandma Lena. James, this one's from us. Oh, look, Daniel, from my parents. Ooh, another tie." Laughter bounced off the walls. Boxes were torn open. Wrapping paper flew. Camera flashes caught joyful surprise. I waited. Minutes passed. 10, 15. No one called my name. I watched as the mailman, who had dropped by with cookies, was handed a small Bluetooth speaker. The housekeeper, who only came once a week, received a designer scarf. I stood, smiling stiffly, still clutching the mug of lukewarm cocoa I'd made myself, and then it ended. "Okay, time to eat," Daniel announced, lifting Emily onto his shoulders. "Let's get that amazing food, Mom." He paused, catching himself. That Lena's mom helped with." I didn't correct him. No one noticed, except one person. Emily lingered by the tree, glancing at me, her small brows furrowed. She held a wrapped box in her lap, untouched. She walked over quietly and said, "Grandma, did they forget your present?" I bent down, brushing her hair behind her ear. "No, sweetheart," I whispered. "Some gifts are invisible." She didn't understand. She just hugged me and returned to her cocoa. I sat through dinner like a shadow. The table was full, but I felt a million miles away. Conversations blurred into noise. I nodded when spoken to, passed dishes, laughed at the appropriate times. But inside, something had begun to crack, not loud or sudden, but slowly, like frost crawling over glass. After dessert, people began to leave. Thank yous were exchanged. Goodbyes, hugs, photos. I was in none of them. I cleaned the plates alone, humming to distract myself from the hollowness in my chest. That night, I sat in my room with the lights off. The soft glow of the Christmas tree in the hallway filtered under the door. I pulled out the photo of my late husband from my drawer, his smile frozen in time. "I don't belong here anymore," I whispered to him, and that's when the memories started flashing. The forgotten dinner 2 months ago, no plate for me. The automatic payment Daniel set up, transferring my pension to simplify things. The bank card Lena offered to hold for safekeeping. One small cut at a time, they had been erasing me. I was not their equal. I was their convenience. And this house, the one my father left me in his will, the one where I raised Daniel, cooked every Christmas meal for 40 years, was no longer mine in spirit, but it was still mine on paper. That night, I pulled out my journal and flipped to a fresh page. With steady hands, I wrote, "I am not a guest, I am the owner, and tomorrow they will remember that." The day after Christmas, the house was unnaturally quiet. Wrapping paper still littered the floor. The fireplace glowed low, as if even it had grown tired of pretending warmth. I made a cup of tea, this time without asking permission. Then I went upstairs, not to my room, but to the attic. The stairs creaked under my weight, the cold biting at my fingertips. Dust clouded the air and boxes lined the walls like forgotten tombstones of a life once fully mine. I found what I was looking for inside a blue tin box. Inside were old photographs, letters, and finally a yellowed envelope. My father's handwriting was still bold. Deed, 215 Willow Creek. The house we were in now. I unfolded the document carefully. My name stared back at me. Margaret Ann Whitmore. Clear and untouched. No transfers, no secondary owners, no mortgage liens. Just mine. My breath caught. I sat down on the floor, stunned by how much power had been sitting, gathering dust while I was being erased. Later that afternoon, I called Henry, our old family lawyer. He was retired now, but his son had taken over the practice. He still remembered me. "Margaret, I always knew your boy would try something one day," he said without needing much background. "Bring the papers. We'll verify everything." I made copies of the deed and walked them over the next morning. A few days later, Henry's son called to confirm it. I was still the sole legal owner. No pending transfers, no encumbrances. Nothing had changed, except the people in it. A week passed, and I watched Daniel and Lena more closely. I noticed him digging through drawers, checking files. He never asked me directly for anything. He just hovered. One evening, I saw him slide a few documents into his briefcase. When I checked later, a folder was missing, the one where I'd kept my father's old letters. They weren't after sentiment, they were after leverage. So I bought a small voice recorder, the kind you can slip into your pocket without anyone noticing. I carried it with me everywhere. I started recording dinner conversations, hallway whispers, late-night arguments behind closed doors. Not all of it made sense at first, but patterns started forming. And then came the conversation. I was upstairs folding laundry when I heard Lena on the phone downstairs. Her voice was low, urgent. I know, she said, pacing. "Just a few more months. Once it's signed, we can refinance it all." Silence. Then laughter. "No, she has no idea. Thinks we're updating her insurance or something." I pressed my back to the wall. My heart pounded. The pieces clicked. That night, Daniel approached me with a file in hand. "Hey, Mom," he said casually. "There's this new senior protection plan we're setting up. It's through Lena's cousin. Just need your signature for the benefits to kick in." He smiled like nothing had ever gone wrong between us, like Christmas hadn't happened, like I hadn't been forgotten. I took the file with shaking hands. "Let me read through it tonight," I said. "Sure," he said, too quickly. "But we'd need it signed by tomorrow to lock in the rate." He kissed my forehead before leaving the room. It felt hollow. Upstairs, I read every page. Buried between legal jargon and policy fluff was a clause. Full property transfer to Daniel Whitmore, effective immediately upon signature. My stomach turned. I didn't confront him. Instead, I made a copy. The next morning, I mailed it to Henry's office for legal documentation, and I kept the original tucked into the journal I now carried everywhere. Later that afternoon, as I sat by the fireplace alone, Emily tiptoed toward me. "Grandma," she whispered, glancing back at the kitchen. I looked up. She held out a tiny, crumpled note in her small hand. I took it gently. "Don't trust Mommy. I heard her say they're tricking you. Please don't sign anything. I love you." I closed my eyes. The fire crackled beside us. Outside, snow began to fall again, quiet, delicate, cleansing. I hugged Emily tightly, burying my face in her hair. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel alone. I didn't tell Daniel I knew. I didn't confront Lena. And I didn't say a word to Emily beyond extra hugs and softer goodnights. Instead, I shifted into a mode I hadn't used since my husband passed. Tactical, focused, quiet. The first thing I did was hire a private investigator. His name was Joseph, recommended by Henry's son. Middle-aged, quiet, sharp-eyed. I need to know everything, I told him. Where they go, what they say, who they talk to. I'm not paranoid. I just want proof. It didn't take long. Within 2 weeks, Joseph delivered photos, receipts, and audio files. Daniel and Lena had been meeting with real estate brokers, not so casually, exploring market options. They visited commercial properties on the other side of town, one of which, according to a recorded conversation, they hoped to convert into a modern brunch place with a southern twist. They'd already paid a deposit. Using my house as collateral, they thought they were clever. The signature they needed was still mine, but they assumed I'd fold under family guilt, or worse, under manipulation disguised as love. I didn't. I organized every piece of evidence into a manila folder. Each document, each receipt, each printed screenshot. I transcribed the recordings by hand, highlighted the lines where Daniel mentioned liquidating Mom's place, or when Lena said, she'll sign if we just make it feel like we're doing it for her safety. They were building their dream with the bricks of my sacrifice, so I built something of my own. I suggested a mother's appreciation dinner. I floated the idea over breakfast, pretending to smile. We've had a rough holiday, I said lightly. Why don't we host something small, just family, just to reconnect? Lena perked up. That's actually a really sweet idea. Daniel nodded. Let's make it special. And I did. I arranged the dinner myself, cooked my husband's favorite dishes, set the table with our wedding china, even lit the fireplace and put on old records. The atmosphere was perfect. But something else happened in the days leading up to the dinner, something that twisted the narrative again. I'd gone into Lena's office looking for tape. Her printer was jammed, blinking red. I tried to help. The paper that came out wasn't what I expected. It was a message, a chat printout, between Daniel and someone named Marcus, and it read, "She won't last much longer. Lena's starting to doubt it, but I've got her wrapped. The old bat'll be out by March." I stared at it. Then I found more. Emails with file names like transfer draft final.docs and power of attorney fake.pdf. These weren't just plans. They were premeditated, papered crimes. But most shocking of all was Lena's name, attached to none of them. She hadn't signed anything. Daniel had been forging everything under her email, her name, her authority. She wasn't the puppeteer, she was the puppet. I felt my knees wobble. The villain I'd been tracking wasn't just my son's wife, it was my son. I left the printouts where they were and went back to my room. That evening, Emily knocked gently. She handed me another folded paper, quickly and in silence before disappearing. Inside, it read, "Grandma, Mommy told me not to talk to you about Daddy's plans. But I know he's lying. I heard him on the phone. I think Mommy's scared, too." I sat on my bed for hours after that, staring at the words, the handwriting, the soft curves of letters formed by tiny, innocent fingers. That night, I didn't sleep. I just watched the snow fall outside the window, my hands clenched, my jaw tight. This was no longer just about hurt feelings or Christmas gifts. This was war, but I wouldn't yell. I wouldn't cry. And I wouldn't throw plates. I would host a dinner. I would serve smiles and wine and old stories. And I would watch them crumble when the truth finally arrived, served not on a platter, but in a folder, thick with every lie they'd ever told. The night of the dinner, I wore the same navy blue dress I'd worn to Daniel's high school graduation. It had faded a little, but still held its shape. And memories. The kitchen smelled of rosemary and butter, the air tinged with firewood and anticipation. Everything was perfect, down to the lemon wedges curled around the salad bowls. They didn't suspect a thing. Lena came down first, wearing a pale sweater and a smile too wide to be real. Daniel followed, holding a bottle of wine. "For you, Mom," he said with practiced warmth. I took it graciously. "Thank you, sweetheart. You always think of me." Emily sat beside me, fidgeting with her silverware. I squeezed her hand under the table. Dinner went on as expected. Light conversation, laughter cued at all the right moments. I played my part well, the grateful mother, the doting grandmother, the woman who couldn't tell left from legal loopholes. As dessert arrived, apple crumble with cinnamon whipped cream, I stood up and gently tapped my glass. "Before we end this beautiful evening," I said, "I'd like to say a few words." They smiled, nodded politely. I cleared my throat, placing a hand over my heart. It's not every day a mother gets to feel so appreciated. You've made me feel loved, truly, but tonight I want to do something for myself. Daniel looked puzzled. Lena tilted her head. I reached under the table and pulled out a brown folder, thick, worn, ready. "This," I said, holding it up, "is my gift to me, and also to all of you, a gift of clarity." Daniel shifted in his chair. I opened the folder and laid out its contents page by page. First, the deed. "This house," I said calmly, "is still under my name, has always been." Then came the audio transcript. In this recording, dated January 6th, Daniel discusses plans to liquidate this property without my consent. His eyes widened. Next, a printed email chain. "Lena, your name is on this file, but you never sent these, did you? Daniel used your email. He forged your consent." Lena's fork slipped from her hand, and this, I held up a page with highlighted text, was the insurance form I was asked to sign. Disguised as a policy upgrade, it was a full property transfer to my son. The room went silent. Emily looked at me with wide eyes. "Grandma." I smiled gently at her, then turned back to the table. "I'm not angry," I said. "I'm not here to humiliate anyone. I'm just tired. Tired of pretending this was still my home when I was being pushed out of it one act at a time." Daniel's jaw clenched. "This is insane," he muttered. "Why are you doing this?" "I'm not doing anything," I said. "You did. You planned it. You lied to your wife. You tried to trick your mother, and you forgot that I didn't get old by accident. I've been watching, listening, preparing." He stood suddenly, chair scraping against the floor. "You're trying to make me look like a villain at your own dinner table," Lena broke. She covered her mouth, tears already rolling down her cheeks. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I swear to God, I didn't know he was doing this behind my back." Daniel glared at her. "You're not helping." "No," she said, voice cracking, "and neither were you." I stayed standing. "I am not seeking revenge. I'm protecting what's mine," I said. "This house, my sanity, my name." Then I pulled a small envelope from the folder and opened it. "These," I said, placing 2 keys on the table, "are the new locks. The house has been rekeyed. I've spoken with my lawyer. You have 3 days to find another place to stay." Lena gasped. Daniel stared at the keys like they were bullets. Emily's lip trembled. "But what about me?" I walked over and knelt beside her. "You can come visit me any time," I said softly. "You and we still have something honest between us." She threw her arms around my neck. No one spoke for a long time. The fire crackled behind us, and the scent of cinnamon, once comforting, now lingered like a ghost of something lost. I didn't cry. Not out of pride, out of peace. Because sometimes taking back what's yours isn't about vengeance. It's about dignity. And I had finally given myself permission to reclaim mine. The morning after the dinner, the house felt still. Not quiet in the painful way it had after holidays, or full of invisible tension like it had been for months, but truly still. As if it too had exhaled. Daniel left first. No words, no apology. just the sound of a suitcase dragging across hardwood and the front door closing a little too hard. I watched from the kitchen window as he shoved bags into the trunk and drove off without looking back. Lena left 2 days later. She knocked on my door before going, her eyes red, suitcase in hand. "I didn't know," she said again, softer this time, "but I didn't stop it either." I didn't nod. I didn't forgive. I simply opened the door. That, too, was a kind of grace. She moved in with her mother, who lived in a smaller home across town. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. Emily stayed the weekend. She cried when she saw her room empty. "I didn't want to go," she whispered. "I didn't want it to be like this." I hugged her tightly. "I know," I said. "None of this was your fault." Since then, she's visited every Saturday. We bake cookies, read books, watch old black and white films she pretends to hate but secretly loves. She brings me hand-drawn cards, stickers, and new words she's learned in school. And I give her something back, a place where love doesn't feel conditional. The house has changed, too. I redecorated slowly, room by room, not to erase memories, but to reclaim space. I turned the living room into a small reading lounge with soft chairs, warm lights, and the scent of cedarwood lingering from candles I now buy, without guilt. I had the locks changed again, this time not out of fear, but ceremony. My bedroom is now filled with plants. I've painted the walls a soft green. The kitchen no longer has labeled shelves or restricted hours, and I've placed a framed copy of the deed on the hallway wall, not as a boast, but a reminder. Not everything they took from me was material. But what I've rebuilt, peace, privacy, purpose, is mine in full. The neighbors noticed the change. Donna from next door dropped off muffins. "It's so nice to see you smile again," she said. "You look lighter." I told her the truth. I stopped making myself smaller so they could fit. She nodded slowly. "That's harder than people think." Yes, it is. But the hardest part wasn't confronting them. It wasn't the paperwork, the planning, the deception I had to expose. It wasn't even the silence that followed once they were gone. The hardest part was accepting that for years I'd confused sacrifice with self-erasure. I had willingly given away pieces of myself, my time, my space, my dignity, believing that's what love required. But love, real love, doesn't ask you to disappear. It invites you to stay. This year, I decorated the house for Christmas alone. Not because no one offered, but because I wanted to. I hung every ornament with intention. I played my husband's favorite records and sang along, off-key and loud. I baked a single pie just for me and ate it with extra whipped cream. And on Christmas morning, I sat by the fireplace in silence. Not the hollow kind, the full kind. The kind that wraps around you like a blanket and says, "You're safe now." I looked at the journal Emily had gifted me weeks earlier, its cover covered in glitter and misspelled words. Inside it, I'd been writing again, longer entries, clearer thoughts. Some were full of memories, others were ideas. But that morning, I turned to the first page and wrote the title, "Gifted Myself the House." Not just the house of bricks and beams, but the house of self, my voice, my worth, my boundaries. This house remembers me now. It knows my footsteps, my laughter, the rhythm of my breathing. It holds my story in every creak and whisper of wind through the windows. I'm not just living here again. I've come home to myself.